Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it is chilly and dry over the coming days, but it is nearing the end, this high pressure dominated weather. We are heading towards something much colder into the weekend and into the start of next week. It is now pretty much guaranteed that we'll be seeing a big North Atlantic extending into Greenland high pressure system, which will push in northerly winds all the way from the North Pole. Now we have to remember it is still mid-November, so we're not going to be seeing anything too exceptional as if this pattern occurred in sort of January or February time, but it still will be cold, and for the time of year it will be very cold, very unusual weather to be seeing this early on in the winter season. Some would even class November as not a wintry month at all, considering our luck over the past few years. We've had very minimal snowfall or wintriness, but it is looking like that could be occurring this year. We'll have a look at the longer range runs after, a look at the GFS, GM, ECMWF and the ensembles, and we'll even have a look at some snow charts from the GFS, because even today it's hinting at the risk of a bit of a snow event maybe starting to crop up into next week. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which do like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in description. Now if you start on the live radar, we can see we've got an easterly flow starting to push in at the moment, and that's why we've got a bit of precipitation in the far southeast. The pressure is slightly lower, which is allowing a little bit of cloud and drizzle to build. Further northwards, a bit more in the way of some sunshine like we saw through Monday, but we should see some sunshine returning for even those areas that were a bit more cloudy today. A bit chilly out there with some fresher air masses, but nothing too exceptional as those temperatures slowly fall as we head towards the weekend. And I'm recording this just before 6 PM, and you can see, especially further northwards, we've got those clearer skies and we have those stiller air. We do have slightly colder conditions, but in the southeast, even though the surface temperatures are slightly milder, it still feels chilly because of that little easterly flow bringing air in from northern Europe. And you can see at the moment the cold air is all the way across Eastern Europe and to our north. Northern and Western Europe really not been too cold recently. It's been generally average to above average. But as I said, that's all going to change as the high pressure that's kept to milder conditions across Northern and Western Europe will transition westwards, and it will allow those northerly winds that have brought colder air to Eastern Europe to bring colder air towards Northern and Western Europe. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, we can't quite extend it into early next week yet when the bulk of that cold air arrives, but we can get to Sunday morning where cold air has pretty much flooded through towards England and Wales and even started to bring some snow for Scotland. And you can see through the rest of Tuesday a bit of cloud around, especially high-level clouds, so it will keep those temperatures up, but where we see clearer skies, it could be a little bit cold, maybe frosty. Through Wednesday is a similar day with some thicker cloud in places, but generally a pretty moderate conditions with the temperatures, and you see sunshine poking through. And then slowly into Thursday, we start to see a bit more cloud, a bit more precipitation from the north, and that's signs of the air masses shifting. Look what happens into Friday. Eventually, a bit more of a succinct weather front pushing in. Again, nothing too extreme, but that is the cold front sweeping in. Initially, rain, but slowly through Saturday, snow starts to fall over the higher grounds of the Scottish mountains. But as we progress through Saturday into Sunday, watch what happens. Not only do the showers get a bit more beefier, but they become more extensive and potentially even go to low-lying areas as well. Coastal areas will struggle. As I have been saying over the past few days, that sea surface temperatures in the North Sea and the North Atlantic are still very mild. We're only a couple of months after the peak surface temperatures, which is late August into September. So they are still very warm, much warmer than they would be in March, for example. And not only does that moderate the upper air temperatures, but also the surface temperatures, meaning it's just a little bit harder to see anything wintry towards those coastal regions. So that's something that we do need to take into account when we're looking at wintriness this early on in the winter. But inland, with elevation especially, very good chance through the weekend Scotland will see some snow. Further southwards, the risk starts to increase, but if we do look at the upper air temperatures, you can see the coldest air is only just pushing in, and you see the cold front is now transitioning across southern England, going from above freezing to below freezing. The proper colder air, which is kind of the -5 and lower, is now just starting to move in, and it will get potentially even colder than this, but again, that will all depend on how strong the wind is and the exact wind direction, which still is causing a few headaches, as we see from some of the longer range charts, which are all broadly very similar with their patterns, just slight alterations in position of low pressure systems or the exact orientations will decide exactly how cold it gets. You can also see one big thing we need for windchiness is cold dew points, and you can see as we head into the weekend, by Sunday morning, most areas are low single digits, if not towards freezing or below freezing. And it's those freezing or below freezing conditions which will give the risk of windchiness. Of course, we need those dew points to be below freezing, as that is when we start to see precipitation form, or that is the temperature, that we see precipitation forming at. And that has to be below freezing for it to be snow, of course. Of course, you can get mixed conditions, you can get freezing rain, but that isn't looking very unlikely in this situation because, of course, we need slightly different atmospheric conditions to be seeing that. If you look at the max temperatures, though, you can see as we head into Tuesday, we are looking at kind of 8 to 12 degrees, which, again, hovering around average for the time of year. If we head into Wednesday, slightly chillier, especially inland and for northern regions where we have clearer skies, but generally still hovering around average by the afternoon, again 8 to 12 degrees. In towards Thursday, again 8 to 12 degrees for most, maybe slightly milder in a few spots, and then Friday is again pretty mild, 8 again to 12 degrees, really staying around the same temperatures through the next few days. But into Saturday, look at those northern regions, low single digits, if not towards freezing over higher ground, as the cold and very cold air starts to push in. Still around those average temperatures further southwards, but that will all change for Sunday. And you can see by Sunday morning, many northern areas are around freezing or below freezing, especially Northern Ireland, Northern England, and all of Scotland. And that's slowly transitioning into England and Wales, where it's still mid-single digits, but that'll get much higher during the day there on Sunday because of that cold air pushing in. Now, if you look at the GFS, which has been kind of the best model we've had over the past week. Again, I wouldn't say it's the most accurate model in terms of its predictions, especially in the detail department, but it got onto this trend a good week ago, and it has been consistent, and it's been fairly correct, as we are now seeing this very cold northerly wind arriving. You can see the high pressure retrogresses to our west over the coming days, low pressure moves out of Greenland, and we see northerly winds arriving. Exactly how strong that northerly flow is, the exact wind direction, will decide those exact temperatures, and again these slight alterations could still happen over the coming days, but this is the rough picture we're looking at for Sunday that all models now agree on. Very cold, northerly winds pushing in, big North Atlantic block extending towards Greenland. Now in the coming days, this is where we start to see massive uncertainty. Now most runs, again, are here, northerly winds pushing in, but GFS starts to develop a low pressure system where we have the milder air pushing into the colder air. Now what happens here is this low slides in, and it's best to view on the upper air temperatures here, as this really shows us what's happening. Milder air trying to push in, has some success, and pushes in for England and Wales and the Republic of Ireland, but Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland stay in the cold and very cold air. Now what this means is potential for major snow around next Tuesday for those regions that stay in the colder air. We'll have a look at the precipitation charts for this run in a minute. Again, not for a literal forecast, but more from an illustrative purpose to kind of show you what this sort of run would produce. But again, this could develop significant snow in places north of England and Wales. I must stress that for northern regions though. Beyond that, the cold air wraps back in, so we all go much colder once again. It is a temporary mild sector. So those areas in southern England will probably be 9 or 10 degrees during the day, but by the night, when the cold air wraps back in, we'll be back down to freezing. The subsequent days, that cold air dominates a bit more. The block is a bit stronger. This next low pushes in and only skims southern England. And what this means is it brings the risk of snow further southwards. The GFS today is very cold, yes, got big milder sectors, so it could be more variable in the south, but it's got a lot more precipitation associated with it, which means, yes, we might not see as much cold weather, but the risk of snow jumps up significantly where that cold air does remain, and we stay cold towards the end of this run with more lows trying to push in, and eventually towards the end of the run we see a massive low developing in the North Atlantic and actually pushing in very warm or hot air here for the end of November. And actually, if we zoom in to the United Kingdom, look, potentially getting towards 20 degrees. So the GFS is very wacky at the moment, and it's all because of this North Atlantic blocking. It's kind of sending it AWOL. But again, just wanted to show you for illustrative purposes that we could be all over the place in the coming days. Look at this, Friday the 22nd, hardly getting above freezing in many regions, but by the 24th into the 25th, temperatures into the low to mid-teens widely, maybe even 20 degrees in the subsequent days. Now, if you look at this on the precipitation charts, really emphasising next week, you can see the cold air arriving through the weekend, snow in the north, but still a bit of rain further southwards, and then this low rise, and look at this significant snow for northern regions, again dumping potentially 5 to 10 centimetres in many areas, clearing through, cold air wrapping back in, maybe some back edge snow for areas further southwards, and then what happened, the next system moves in, and heavy snow for southern England. Again, this is not a forecast, I highly doubt this will happen, but it shows you what could happen if we did see milder air interacting with cold air, even though it's still mid-November. These sort of conditions can occur. Evaporative cooling is definitely going to be a factor in the next week or two, as again, because it is so early on in the season, we do have caveats to the risk of snow, meaning it's just that little bit harder for it to occur because of the time of year. Now, if you look at the GM, again, we've highlighted this. It's been a bit more of a pessimistic run over the past few days, but today it is again very cold. Again, northerly wind arriving into next week, very similar to the GFS, pretty much bog standard. Now, the run's all agreement on this. Into next Tuesday, we do see a little bit of development of lower pressure towards the North Atlantic, but the high is much stronger. Therefore, that low never properly develops, and we do see some brief small lows developing further southwards. But not only are they weaker, but they are much further southwards, which means if we look at the upper air temperatures, milder sectors remain out into France. Now, because the northerly wind isn't quite as direct and as strong, we do have not quite as cold air dominating the UK, which means the snow risk is actually lower. Even though there's less, even though the air is colder than the GFS, because there's less interaction and that cold air isn't quite, or the cold air that is here at least, isn't quite from that far northerly direction, it isn't going to be as wintry just because we don't have as much cold air in place, even though the milder sector is much further away. So again, that's something to keep a close eye on. Right towards the end of the run, though, you can see it does remain very cold and blocked, and could even see around 2 as we see another push of very cold air out of the Arctic. So GM is chillier, it is colder, it is drier, but the risk of snow probably would actually be lower, even though the milder sector is much further away, just because the cold air we do have in place just isn't quite as cold as the GFS. The GFS, yes, has very mild air very close by, but it also has even colder air close by, because those isobars are much, much tighter together, meaning those streams of northerly winds are that much stronger. Now, today, the best run for colder wintry weather is actually the ECMWF. The ECMWF has been the most realistic run over the past week or two, always been the kind of moderator within the models, where GFS has been very wacky, very cold. We saw that insane run on Saturday. The GM has been mild, actually, and it's kind of flipped back to colder conditions the last sort of 2 or 3 or 4 days. The ECMWF has kind of been in the middle, been the steady Eddie. It's been very steady with its runs, no massive deviations, but it's taken a bit of time to show the cold weather, really only getting on board over the weekend. Now, today, it is probably the coldest run, as I said. High pressure moving westwards, northerly winds pushing in again. Initially struggles to see that very cold air push in, but you can see the isobars take a very long track to get towards us. So already deviating a little bit from the UKV there, but eventually we do see that direct northerly. No low pressure development really in the Atlantic at all. Bits well to our south towards Spain and Portugal, and we just stay in this very cold northerly flow with any low pressure system pushing in from the north. And if we look at the upper air temperatures, we stay in the -5 isotherm, and we stay cold for the last 3 or 4 days of this run. Takes a little bit longer to get in, probably maybe next Monday, Tuesday, not Sunday, like the UKV showing. So again, deviations there, but it's much more sustained and it looks much more blocked into the final week of November, whereas the GFS looks much more mobile with that Atlantic pattern. So you see 3 runs all in agreement towards the weekend in their overall synoptic patterns. Again, subtle differences in the exact air masses, the exact direction of the wind and strength of that northerly flow, but rough agreement now that it is going to go cold. And again, we've got to sort of firm up on those details over the coming days. You can see though the GFS ensembles and the ECMWF ensembles are in very strong agreement now that it's going cold, if not very cold. You can see upper air temperatures around average, slightly above average over the next 3 or 4 days, well below average into next week. And look at that, already increasing precipitation led by the GFS operational run, which is, as said, been very wacky. And look at that in its extended range, it's all over the place. But for a good 5 to 7 days here, we are looking like we're hovering around the -5 line, which is kind of the threshold for snow. It doesn't mean we're definitely going to see snow. There are other caveats and other things at play, but we're just looking strictly at the upper air temperatures. The -5 is kind of the minimum we need, and you can see we're pretty much hitting it here into next week. You can see, though, precipitation spikes starting to bump up, some brief little spikes in the upper air temperatures, and that is symbolic of these warmer sectors pushing in the risk of significant snow in places. If we do look at the snow depth spikes, again, don't take this too literally, you can see some big spikes appearing and some smaller spikes, meaning the risk is there of something substantial, but there is very little agreement within the ensembles, just showing you what the possibilities are at the moment. Dew points down towards freezing, if not below freezing. Again, that's another big tick box there for wintry weather. And then if we do finally just look at those 2 meter temperatures, again, looking at down towards sort of 4 or 5 degrees at best as we head into next week. And again, that's for London, which is one of the mildest places in the British Isles. Of course, coastal areas might be slightly milder, but most areas inland, especially as you get more rural with any elevation, even 100 to 200 meters of elevation, which really isn't noticeable at all for most people, makes a difference by a degree or 2 in these sort of conditions. And then finally, if we look at the ECMWF, again, it's broadly very similar, a little bit more pessimistic with those upper air temperatures, but still getting down to kind of that -3 to -5 region with increasing precipitation today, so increasing chances of wintry weather. And if we compare to Glasgow, just to compare further northwards, it's a similar amount, 3 to 4 degrees below average, maybe 5 degrees below average. But you see the average is lower, so inevitably it is colder here. And if we do look at the GFS, it is broadly very, very similar, down towards -5 or slightly cooler. And of course, being further northwards, there is even more snow spikes here. So for Scotland, I think there is a very high chance now we see significant snow, especially over hills and mountains. Low-lying areas, there's actually quite a moderate chance now, decent chance we see at least small amounts of snow, maybe even a lot of snow. Northern hills, across like England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, there is again a pretty decent chance you see snow. How much snow? Very uncertain. And for low-lying areas, which I know the majority of people are, and that's always a question, will low-lying areas see snow? Will southern England see snow? There is a decent chance, or the highest chances this time of year we've had in many years. But I can't say it's a high chance, relative to Scotland, for example. The air is cold. It's not exceptionally cold, it's not -10 isotherm pushing in, and of course it is mid to late November. We are not in the bulk of winter yet. So we've got those things kind of working against us for wintry weather. But I must say, there is a good chance of seeing at least some falling snow, some sleet, especially seeing some ice. And then there is the chance, if the GFS came off, for example, of seeing some more significant snow, some evaporated cooling within one of these low pressure systems that slides through. We'll have to wait and see. Again, we'll firm up these details over the coming days. I think the weekend will be a very interesting watch when we can really delve into some of the shorter range runs. But yeah, definitely looking like many are going to be cold next week, or all are going to be cold next week. And there is the risk that some, if not many, are going to be wintry as well. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.